the expectations from HR functionally are changing. We have just last week rolled out a month-long intervention on how do I become a more accomplished business HR leader. Because I think somewhere the ability of the function to understand business well, talk that dialogue, and then link it back to HR actions is an important area for growth for all HR people, including me. So how do we hone that skill for ourselves becomes important. P&L understanding is becoming another important area in an environment where there are just so many multiple linkages. You just can't come up with a set of initiatives without understanding the implications of that on a P&L, right? So really getting people closer to business,
Yeah.
and talking that language is something we are consciously focusing on to develop in our own function.
Yeah.
That's point number one. Point number two is in terms of how do I build my change orchestration capabilities. When you're talking about change management will always get driven by role modeling of behavior. It will always get driven by the set of either policies, guidelines, or rewards you're going to put in place. However, all these things will have to be orchestrated. And that's where HR has to play a role. How do I help the HR leaders to become much better in orchestrating change?
Ayaskant, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Doing awesome, Chris, and thank you so much for inviting me over.
Yeah. No, next time we'll do it in person, right? I'll travel to you in India. You can come here. we can start virtual, but it'd be good to see you someday. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little about you personally and your journey to where we are now.
So, from a education perspective, I have an engineering degree first, and then I wanted to do my master's. I was more keen on getting into finance. But as luck would have it, I enjoyed the subjects of HR a lot more, and that got me interested to get into HR. So I did my master's in HR in India, and there again for the last 25 odd years plus, I've been a student of the fund, right? So initial years were into multiple functional roles, be it into CNB or leading multiple COEs, so on and so forth. I must mention that a lot of my personal education as an individual, as a leader, happened at GE, General Electric.
Nice.
At John, it was the best company in the world. I'm
Yeah.
talking about
And they were well known for their world-class HR programs as well.
exactly. So, spent about 8 years in the healthcare business, 3 years in the corporate business, and then came in my next um, fabulous journey, which was with Wipro. In Wipro, I had tremendous amount of learning in the IT business. There again, played multiple roles, both as a generalist as well as a specialist. And from there on, moved to head the function for the non-IT businesses of Wipro, because Wipro had interest in FMCG, in multiple other B2B businesses like automation, hydraulics, etc.,
Yeah.
water. So I led the function for the whole of the Wipro Enterprises business. And then here I am in my current stint, where I lead HR for Mphasis. We're about $1.8 billion with almost 32,000 employees spread across the globe as a CHRO. So enjoying every day with the company here. Great company to be part of. On the personal side, I have a son who is just turned 18. My wife, she's a homemaker. So just three of us. And of course, here in Bangalore. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, so much to take in there. I'm surprised we didn't cross paths before, because I think I mentioned when we first spoke that we did a lot of work with Wipro over the
Yeah.
years with Deepak Parija and
Yes.
a lot of the team members there as well. Fascinating organization as well, and kind of almost felt like it came out of nowhere. And it was just, when I first came across the organization, I was like, wow, where did this company come from? But tell everyone a bit more about Mphasis. Like, what do you do? Who do you serve? Maybe just for the audience, just so they understand a bit more.
So at Emphasis, we are an IT services company, with primarily a focus would be on taking a tech first approach to our clients globally. We have presence and market leadership in areas like BFS.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, we have strong presence in high tech, in insurance, in healthcare, in travel. Almost 5,000 of our employees are based across multiple cities in the US. 1,000 odd employees
Wow.
are based out of multiple cities in Europe. And then 20 odd thousand employees based out of multiple cities in India.
Mm.
Very young and dynamic workforce. One of the two things that we kind of take a lot of pride in, we take a lot of pride in being geeky as an
I
organization.
love that.
Um, we take a lot of pride in having a very strong tech first approach to our clients. And that's how we try and differentiate ourselves in this highly competitive industry. Really proud of the fact that as a company, we have grown tremendously over the years. And even if I look at FY25, we just got over. For us, we're again one of the very, very few IT companies globally which did well for itself, both on the top line and bottom line.
Yeah, and in many ways, your people are your product.
Yes,
So it's very
assets.
yeah. Yeah. You're and yeah. Is when I say product, I mean they are the people that are interacting with your clients every single day,
Yes,
right? So it's even more. I feel like the role of HR in an organization like that is even more important in terms of
absolutely.
how do you can make that connection, right?
Absolutely. The two things, right, in our industry, one, an happy employee leads to a happy client.
Exactly, because they're directly connecting with your
So
customers every day. Yeah.
that's point number one. And then the other point is the people investments is a significant part of the overall P&L, right? So how you hire, how do you develop, how you groom, how do you place them into different projects, that becomes such a core part of the organization strategy, the people supply chain, in addition to the retention part of it.
Yeah. I know we've got so many great topics to get into today, but I want to jump straight into kind of what we are just talking about. You know, in a world where your customers are expecting more tailored experiences now more than ever, and you're offering many of these solutions as well. How can organizations effectively leverage technologies like AI, like data analytics, to sort of hyper personalize this at scale?
A lot of the hyper personalization, in my view, is really about understanding your client better, or for that matter, an employee better. So, large part of the hyper personalization would come through conversations. And then those conversations will have to get sharpened with strong data backed view, which would come from your AI framework or the analytics framework. And therefore, keeping that in mind, how do you bring the conversations, the people part of it, and the tech part of it, combine it together and take it to a specific client, customizing it for that specific industry and that specific problem to be solved, is an important science and art in itself. So rather than going and telling a client that, look, I can solve world hunger for you, the sharper we define that this is a specific problem that can get addressed by using XYZ solutions. And this is therefore the benefit for you in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term, would really get a client much more excited. Right. And that's what becomes a differentiator. So, in our parlance, we see two types of conversations. One is responding to a client's need when the client asks us questions. But the other important part is having proactive conversations where one would have dialogues, debate, discussions to understand what's in a client's mind, what are the problems they're trying to solve fundamentally for their clients. And then one works backwards, say, if you implement this specific solution in your environment, this is going to help you address these specific areas for you.
Yeah.
So, and therefore, the language has to be talking about the client's problem in their words that they understand, and defining the problem so that they can visualize how you are defining it for them and the impact it has for them, and the tech solution. which has to be customized for that specific industry. You can't take a solution that has been customized for an aerospace industry and say, hey, this is how it's going to work in a bank.
Mm-hmm.
You have to talk the banking domain language as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So are you
So
taking this exact same approach internally when it comes to your people and the different functions? Is it the
absolutely,
same approach?
absolutely, absolutely. I think for us, it's to begin with from an employee perspective, it starts with listening. Right? How do I listen to an employee very effectively? Both the formal feedback that comes our way as well as the informal feedback. Because once one listens to an employee, then one kind of gets, hey, this is what an employee really needs or would value. One could be need or one could value.
That's true.
And then customizing your solutions around it. So, for example, if I'm an employee, I know three or four languages from a tech perspective. Now, an organization knows that these are four or five projects that are going to come in the future, which would require a different set of technologies. So, if I can communicate very sharply to the employee that, look, you are certified in technologies A and B, there's a lot of work happening in C in the future. If you learn C, it's going to help you move up the value chain for yourself as an individual. It'll have that much tighter integration to what the employee would like to do, vis-a-vis just saying, you have learned A and B, now figure out what you need to do. Because the employee might not know at times what the person would like to know.
Yeah.
Right. Just helping connect the left hand with the right hand using tech, and at the same point in time giving the choice to the employee to say, hey, I can go with approach A or I can go with approach B for myself or her, is the way to go. That's how we kind of define hyper personalization, really customizing solutions so that the employee believes that, okay, if I learn a certain set of skills, it's going to help me in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Because that's sometimes missing, like the why, or the what's in it for me.
Correct.
Is sometimes you have that disconnect, right? Because it's like, what is my role in this? What does this mean for Chris? So we kind of have to go from just like not just surface level. We have to really individualize and hyper personalize. How tactically, how do you do that though? How are you capturing this information, and then how are you personalizing this to the individual? Because that's the challenge that many companies right now are going through, and there's a million different technologies and solutions that are claiming to help you solve this. And I know you're probably still on the journey because everyone is. So
Yes.
how are you approaching this right now?
So there are three or four ways in which we are trying to capture this. One, obviously, a lot of tech is getting used in solutions, and let me kind of specifically talk about uh, one platform which is called TalentNext,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is nothing but an AI powered engine which has an individual's past track record from a skill set perspective, what the person has done, so on and so forth. It nudges the person in terms of learning new areas, which is in line with the demand that is there from a skill perspective. And it helps the employee over a 2 year, 3 year, 2 months, 3 months journey to help build that capability for himself or herself with a formal certification. And then once that is done, it starts nudging the employee to say, hey, these are the types of work which are now available within the organization. Why don't you apply for them using your IJP and see if you can land with something that's of interest to you, given that you just got certified in it, right? So that's a very specific example on how does one tie it back to what I have learned to what I'm going to work on. A similar example happens even in onboarding. Because for us, given the distributed workforce that we are in, we end up hiring close to 2,500 employees every quarter
Wow.
global. Right? Now, the days of onboarding, which used to be a day one and two experience, are getting challenged in today's day and age when there's a highly competitive environment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
One is engaging with the candidate much more effectively right post offer acceptance, even before the person joins, to talk about how would life change for that individual. Then comes in the entire day one, day two experience. It has to be a wow. Do I have the right Do I understand how the company works? Do I understand what my goals are? Who is my buddy who I can ask the very basic questions going to guide me through my expectations with my manager, so on and so forth. And then the respective system checks again 15, 20 days down the line to see if the person has assimilated well. Because the game has changed from onboarding to assimilation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because that's when you get true value from an individual,
Yeah.
especially when people are running in a hybrid environment. So there again, you have a hyper personalized experience because it is talking to me. It is linking me back to my own buddy, my own manager, clarity for my role expectations, and then connecting with the right set of people over the next 15, 20 days so that I become effective.
Yeah.
So the question of what is in it for me is getting answered through an effective tech-enabled onboarding framework. That's
Yeah.
another example.
Yeah, I love that. And we know from the data, right, that how important that onboarding experience is in terms of the retention.
Yes.
That it's critical, those moments that matter early, whether someone's
Yes.
going to be successful. There's a lot of data out there to support that. So it makes sense. Have you seen that as well? The more that you've invested in that early stage, that
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
What I know people are going to be listening who are going to be asking, what do you use for your onboarding? What technology or solution do you use for that? Because that's
No,
something
so
many people are exploring, how they reimagine onboarding. And again, there's a lot of systems, and also TalentNext. Is that something you built yourself?
talent is something which we built ourselves.
Wow, amazing.
But on for onboarding, we use a tool called Expand.
Expand. Okay, that's a new one for me. Like I'm normally not surprised, but cool, interesting.
And then we use another tool which is called Prism Force.
Prism
Now,
Force.
Prism Force is very, very interesting in our environment, Chris, because it actually links your entire people supply chain together.
Ah,
Because right, us, what is my demand from a client's perspective? Then for that demand, do I have
I
talent
see,
available
and that's very
in
specific to what. That's
my
okay.
industry?
That makes so much sense because you need to
So
be able
that
to
is
measure
again
that.
horizontal
Mm,
layer we have built on top of all our tools, right? I don't know something. I can see a thumbs down now. On my hand, maybe on the
no,
screen. I don't know
that's
whether you
fine.
saw that.
Don't worry about that. It's just like a Zoom. So yeah, that's super interesting because that's very unique to your industry and the service that you offer. So that makes sense.
Because for us, we have multiple tools, right? One, there's a hiring tool, there's a learning tool, there's a talent allocation tool. So you can imagine this sits as a horizontal on top of it.
Yeah,
And the moment you have a horizontal tool on top of it, you're actually seeing things from the lens of an employee.
yeah,
Because an employee is interested in, hey, am I getting the right opportunity for myself? Am I learning? What's my next project going to be? How will I grow? How will I get promoted? So on and so forth. So the horizontal tool Prism Force gives that holistic end-to-end view from an employee perspective.
yeah. When you mentioned TalentNext, I was wondering how do you link those opportunities to learning? So if someone's interested in a role, but perhaps there's some development needs, does that link to an LMS? Is that built in? What does that experience look like for them to upskill and reskill themselves?
So there are two ways in which we have kind of tightly integrated it. One is Talent Next is more like a buddy for me as a
Okay.
system,
Mm-hmm.
as a plethora of uh, interventions available for me, and is nudging me to keep learning new things, keeping in mind my interest. Because first I have to go and just write down what my interests are, and basis my interests, it's going to also suggest why don't you learn XYZ as well in addition to this, because given some extra things that the system is seeing which you might not be seeing. So that's one aspect of it. But the other important part that we've also done and tightly integrated is linked this entire thing back to our appraisal framework, Chris.
Okay.
So today, whatever I'm learning, whichever areas I'm getting certified, all that information is going and sitting on my appraisal system.
I see.
So when having conversations with my manager on my performance, that also becomes an integral part of my conversations. That I had committed that these are things that I would learn. Have I got, have I learned all those things? Manager could tell me, no, no, yeah, I think while you learned XYZ, why don't you learn something else as well, which I can add to myself? So it's like closing the loop back. One is my own personal connect with the talent next to explore the world around it. But the other is an engagement framework so that it is linked back to my performance, so that I know after having learned something, did I deliver on what I learned?
Yeah.
And then the feedback from manager, that who is more like a coach saying, hey, have you learned this? Why don't you learn something else? So on and so forth. So that loop gets closed
Yeah,
for
I
us.
was just thinking that in my head. I was like, just the full loop. I love that because it's put learning into action, and then that's being recognized by your manager. You're having the conversation. It kind of feeds back in. Also aligns with the business, your customers. Basically,
Exactly.
everything is kind of linked into that loop. Within Talent Next, is that also like a marketplace in
Yes.
terms of like new opportunities, new jobs?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it
So the
acts as a talent
marketplace,
marketplace as well.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So the way this I said, the Prism Force is on the top.
Yes.
So integrating this whole thing together. So from Talent Next, I can see what my future opportunities are. I get into Prism Force and apply for new roles,
Love it.
which is of interest.
Yeah. Sorry for all
But
the questions. I'm just really interested. Like it's so interesting that you've managed to bring it all together and still create a cohesive user experience. Because
yes.
sometimes it can get a bit messy, where you have different platforms or different experiences, and the challenge is how do we create one place
Yes.
with a great experience that people actually feel empowered to take charge of their career, right? And their learning. Learning is not the company's responsibility; it's theirs. But you have to give them the right tools and the opportunity and the framework to be able to do that.
True.
Yeah. What are you most excited about? We spoke about AI. We can't not have a conversation without talking about AI. Where are the areas for you as a HR leader in your team currently experimenting? What are some of the areas where you're leveraging AI at the moment?
Today, at an organizational level, we are using AI across multiple levels. Let me kind of quickly rattle down a few areas. One, obviously, is in hiring, because we're talking about scale, so tech plays a big role there. We talked about onboarding, we talked about training. In addition to that, we are also using AI in HR ops, because there's a ton of data that is there, and an employee would seek, how would their life change. They could have very, very basic questions. I mean, as basic as what's my leave balance, right?
Yeah,
But you need
exactly.
somebody to have a very engaging conversation with them and also guide them in terms of how they can plan their life better, right? So HR ops becomes an integral part in our strategy. And then last but not the least, the entire performance management and appraisal framework, because there's a ton of data that is there in a year for an individual. So our appraisal system uses AI to kind of bring all of that together for a manager and an employee to have a good quality conversation. Because otherwise, what happens in the absence of not using tech, we end up having conversations. This is what we saw and remembered in the last 2 months,
Yeah.
which at times may or may not be ideal. Right? In fact, on most occasions, not ideal. Right. So using tech to kind of bring all the events that have happened in the year to kind of have a quality conversation just helps. So those are the areas where we're using AI. I think to your point, and by the way, when I'm saying all of this, like you earlier said, Chris, it's a journey. We have a share of
Of course,
good
everyone's on.
days.
Yeah, everyone's on the journey. Yeah.
I think the other piece where we are spending a lot of time is on building the culture, given all the changes that are happening, both externally, internally, geopolitically, whatever it could be. So change has become a norm for all of us. So as a function, how can we be proficient in change management? How do we lead from the front? How do we be intentional about change management? Because while all of us talk about it, I don't think we're intentional about it. How do I become intentional about change management? Something that, as a function, we keep brainstorming about, because this is for real.
And it seems and every day there's something new, right? Whether it's the political landscape, whether it's AI change and transformation, whether it's COVID, we're just constantly being. I feel like now more than ever, our leaders and our managers are under a lot of pressure. Everyone is, but I feel like especially our frontline managers,
Absolutely.
especially. And when I was a manager, we didn't talk about soft skills and things like resilience.
Yes.
That wasn't in the list of key competencies, and it has to be now, right?
Yes.
In there as well, and you have to build. That is a muscle you can build, and many organizations, talking about building a resilient culture, is very important. But practically, how do you go about doing that? So I'd love to understand your views of like, how are you helping equip the organization and your leaders to help drive this in the constant state of change that we face?
Great question. So I think, let me again give specific examples. And just building on your point, Chris, when it comes to educating managers in our environment, what we have said is that it's a continuous process, right? And for our first time managers and our middle managers and for our senior managers, their development has to be an intentional activity. So, for example, every time we have a person who becomes a manager for the first time in our environment right now, there is automatically a set of interventions the person has to do over a 2.5 months time frame, so that the person is equipped with the skills required to manage teams. So, for example, undergoing a dedicated module on how do I delegate, how do I have conversations, how do I listen, so on and so forth. For example, and linking back to your example on COVID, one of the things that research showed across organizations is COVID made the companies much more empathetic.
Yep.
Now that we have become empathetic, how do I not lose that again because life is normal?
And still have hard conversations.
Still have had conversations.
Yeah.
So weaving that element in, having difficult conversations, right? So creating modules on our leadership principles, ensuring that anybody who is a new manager or a good seasoned middle manager as well, continuously going through such frameworks. So, just to give an example, in the last 2 quarters, we have covered around 500 managers through these interventions. And the content would keep changing, keeping in mind something else would keep evolving, something else would keep uh, going back, so on and so forth. Um, and making that as a continuous process. That's one big framework. The second important framework, Chris, which I touched lightly on, is sustaining our listening. So frequent surveys. So we have something called as a moodometer, which captures the mood of our employees.
Say moodometer.
How am I feeling? Moodometer.
I love
It
that.
just captures the mood of. Right?
Yeah.
For example, how are you feeling today?
How often do you do that?
Right? And I mean, anybody can do it at any point in time in a day.
Ah, okay, nice. Ongoing. Nice.
It's 24/7. It's running, right? So at the end of the day, while it is called moodometer, it is a simple listening tool, right? You are just trying to listen what is in a person's mind. Similarly, you're doing frequent checks once in 6 months, going out with surveys, talking about how are you feeling about your work? How are you feeling about your manager? How are you feeling about your organization? Does your work connect with the larger purpose of the organization?
Yeah.
So, having those specific questions, getting responses back from our employees, again, that's listening. But more importantly, the larger point is sharing it with the senior leadership, having quality conversations there. That's the larger part, because it's also about sensitizing the larger leadership on, look, this is what is in the mind of our employees, the good and the not so good,
Yeah.
because that's when you drive change. And again, as I said, this is not like you do it once and it gets over.
No, it's ongoing. Yeah.
This is something that keep going, but ensuring that these tracks are up and running, there are dedicated leaders focusing on it, and sustaining it becomes an important area. I mean,
Yeah.
simple example, just to kind of bring home the point on tech in HR, since we talked about it a short while ago. Today, consciously, we have a dedicated HR leader just focusing on tech in HR. I did not have that position a year back.
Yeah, most companies didn't, but they have to
Yeah.
now.
The simple reason is all of us, while you would say, hey, this tech is required, we are so busy doing something else that you end up forgetting about doing what is also required. So you need somebody to own it and run it.
And pilot,
Similarly,
right? Like they need to also be piloting and testing. Like there's no such thing as just getting it right the first time. Like in that you have to experiment, right? And have an innovation hub of sorts where you can
yeah. So
have
therefore,
that.
having a dedicated employee engagement and listening team. Full-time job is just to think of how creatively can I engage with teams? How do I sensitize managers? How do I listen more? How do I close the feedback?
Yeah,
That's
I feel like we saw that the real importance of that communication during COVID, because now like HR became the communication engine for employees. So you had to have really good marketing and communication skills within the HR function, which in the past was kind of like a bit of an afterthought. But during COVID, you saw companies that really thrived had a really good team that communicated effectively and efficiently, and even used tools to personalize that communication across the different geographics and cultures, because there's cultural nuance, right? In depending on where you're communicating, and that was a muscle that kind of was forced to be developed during that period. But to your point, it's no longer a nice to have. It's
yes.
essential that we have that, so that people feel like they're connected and to the organization as well. I do want to ask, you mentioned obviously the manager development, and that's a big challenge for most people I'm talking to right now. I think you said you did 500 managers in the last quarter. How long did you say the program was again?
3 months.
3 months. What does that look like tactically? Because you have a global organization, some in office, some remote. You have to cater to all of them. Is it something you again built internally? Could you just kind of describe what that looks like? Is it video modules? Just really interested to know what that looks like.
So it would have video modules, it would have uh, formal training in classroom settings spread across 2 to 3 days, and action learning projects. And the reason why we've consciously designed it that way is because otherwise, if you learn something and you're not practicing it, you end up forgetting about it. So it has all the three elements integrated. Of course, this has been done in partnership with a couple of firms. For one
Mm-hmm.
of them, we're working close with Aon as one of our partners. So some of the elements are done by us. So, for example, some of the course content has been customized, keeping in mind our own examples,
Sure.
uh, rather than kind of just going with canned content. Right? But again, all getting monitored centrally from a program management perspective.
Yeah.
Uh, I think all those elements,
I love that.
dialogue, dialogues between teams from a project perspective, because today one can actually do a workshop using tech, which wasn't the case uh, 3 4 years back.
Yeah. And I think that more now than ever, learning is becoming a team sport, right?
Exactly.
More and more. So yeah, thank you for breaking that down, because I think everyone's reimagining what that looks like right now. So it's always interesting to know how other companies are approaching this. You mentioned there's a lot of change that's happening, and I know this wasn't one of our questions, but it just came to mind. Like, how has that made you rethink the skills and roles that you now require within your own HR function? Because a lot of what we're describing it's not just an organizational transformation and change, but that's also going to force you to have a different set of skills and competencies and capabilities within your own team. I see obviously with people analytics is kind of has been a role within HR, but I'm now even seeing engineers within the HR team, and I'm saying prompt engineers, actual engineers to help with the integrations. I just wanted to know how like you're preparing your own team and rethinking the role of HR.
No, great question. I think the expectations from HR functionally are changing, right? So one obviously is adding new roles which weren't there earlier. As we talked about the tech in HR. Similarly, in the learning function, we have content writers now,
Yeah,
right? Who
yeah,
can help create content which can be engaging for anybody looking at that stuff, right? So those roles weren't existing earlier, till about even 12 to 24 months back. So those are new roles that got added. Second is, especially for the layer, one layer below me, we have just last week rolled out again a month-long intervention on how do I become a more accomplished business HR leader, because I think somewhere the ability of the function to understand business well, talk that dialogue, um, and then link it back to HR actions, is an important area for growth for all HR people, including me. So, how do we hone that skill for ourselves becomes important. P&L understanding is becoming another important area.
Yeah.
You just can't, especially in an environment where there are just so many multiple linkages, you just can't come up with a set of initiatives without understanding the implications of that on a P&L. Getting teams engaged with the business process so that teams understand uh, which leader is doing well, why is a specific leader meeting targets, why is another leader struggling to meet targets, right? So really getting people closer to business
Yeah.
and talking that language is something we are consciously focusing on to develop in our own function.
Yeah.
That's point number one. Point number two is in terms of how do I build my change orchestration capabilities. That's another big model we have put in place, right? Because when you're talking about change management will always get driven by the line. It'll always get driven by role modeling of behavior. It'll always get driven by the set of either policies, guidelines, or rewards you're going to put in place. However, all these things will have to be orchestrated, and that's where HR has to play a role.
Yeah.
So, one of the areas that we are again trying to build in our own function is how do I help the HR leaders? I'm talking about the leaders who are two levels below me right now to become much better in orchestrating change
Yeah. One.
consciously.
Yeah. I mean, one
Those are two specific areas we are focusing on in addition to the regular
a
stuff.
lot. One of the things I love about everything you've been saying is throughout since the beginning of this call is everything you talk about is grounded in the organization's context with practice. So linking that back to actually executing on the learning in the organization and then linking it back to the business priorities.
Yes.
So everything you've described is through the lens of that. And I think that in itself takes it from what you described, which is being a strategic HR business
Yeah.
partner, right?
Yes.
It's not just you're grounding it in the business context. You're actioning on this constantly, and then constantly learning and evolving along the way. And that's from a whether you spoke about technology that you chose, it was through that lens. Whether it was training, it was through that lens. Whether it's the roles that you described, is through that lens. So that's kind of one of my key takeaways already from this conversation is the way it's grounded in that thinking, and it all links back into one another. I'm assuming that's very intentional on your behalf. Yeah.
That's, and that's the only way HR would get uh, a good seat on the table.
Yeah, 100%. No, I mean it's really, really interesting. Um, where do you see the biggest area that HR can have the most impact?
I think employee experience is changing as a framework continuously. And I think for us as a function, how do we reimagine employee experience is something that all of us need to collectively put our minds together much better.
Yeah, yeah, because
That's an
that's fun.
area
It's
where
fundamentally changed, right? The way the workforce and workplace has fundamentally changed. The way
yeah,
in work gets done is completely changing as well, and that's all going to require a very different employee experience.
that's one. And in addition to that, the entire something that we were groomed into as in functionally, I think, but taking it to the next level is really being the conscience keeper of the culture of the company.
Mm,
I
yeah,
think that's critical. Otherwise, culture always gets tested when there is stress.
That's the time where culture really shows up,
I would say.
and it shows, are you really living up
Exactly.
to your values and your culture, right? Or is it just some words on the
Yeah.
wall?
And culture always gets tested in terms of how you take decisions in an organization.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's easy to do it when things are going great, right? And it's easy to say this is what we stand for, this is our culture, right? But it's when times are tough that you see company and employees remember that, right?
Exactly.
So those employees during COVID, that their companies stood up, they stayed strong, they supported, they lived up to their culture and values. They are the most highly engaged employees that you would have, right? And those companies that didn't, they lost a lot of employees during that time. And I think for us, even in our small business, whenever we have a tough time and go through a lot of change, our culture and our values is our foundation to make decisions. Because
Yes.
sometimes during all of the chaos, you might be tempted to be pulled. And Shane and I always sit down. Is this aligned with our values? Is this aligned with our culture? And if the answer is no, then we move on. Despite the tempting shiny object that may be out there. So it's a great place to ground from there as well. Before I let you go, I want to ask you some sort of quick fire questions. These are sort of just some fun, quick questions that I ask all the guests. I know you wasn't expecting this, but no one ever expects it. What are your hobbies and passions outside of the office?
I love cricket.
Play,
Play
watch, or both?
now, of course, now at my age, it's difficult to play to watch. But cricket and tennis are two things that I can watch forever.
Yeah, me all. I love both as well. What would you say is like the one thing that you do to really kind of take care of your own mental health and well-being? Because it's tough, right? Like no one talks about the toll of what it means, to sit in the CHRO seat. What are some of your advice or tools that you use?
At least I can just talk for myself. A couple of things that I use is one, obviously, consciously take some time out for family. Uh, I mean, even if it's solving a problem along with my son,
Yeah,
jointly doing it, but doing it consciously, right? Having that break that says work is over, let me kind of do things that are important for me as well. But doing it, that's one important part. Reading, because I think reading for me just helps me become much more aware of what's happening around me. It challenges your thought process, it challenges your beliefs, so that you don't get, so that otherwise, at least for me, when I read, I feel, hey, there is a lot more to life, there is a lot more to work than
yeah,
what I know.
yeah,
And that pulls me down, I must confess. And then just spending time with friends. I think I strongly believe that in life, one would have 5 or 6 people who are really close to you, who really know you well. So give it back to them and be nice to them and just spend time with them.
yeah.
Those
I,
are those are things I still try and do for
no, I love
myself.
those examples, and all of those examples that you mentioned. I try to do this with my young daughter. It allows you to be present in the moment and perhaps just forget about the daily challenges and stress that you have. Like my most enjoyable part of my day is going home and seeing my daughter and just spending a few hours with her and just disconnecting from the day. And it sounds like that's something similar for you
Yes.
as well. What would you say is like the legacy that you want to leave behind for your kids and for the family?
Well, that's a tough one.
I know, I just threw it at you. He wasn't
Well,
expecting
I
that.
think if they know me as somebody who was sincere, worked hard, lived life the right way, and gave his best every day.
Yeah,
Uh, I think those are things I would like to be remembered for. Um, yeah, and if my son tries to do some of those and excels, I'll be even happier.
yeah. That's amazing. I know that's a tough one, right? Because not often you're asked that question as well. But I mean, that's a great legacy. That's all we can ask in many ways to leave behind. Who'd you say is like the one person in your that's had the biggest impact on your career? If you had to choose one person, you say, Chris, this person really.
My dad. When I remember when I was studying, I was slightly naughty as a kid. He once told me, he didn't allow me to eat. He said, till you finish your stuff. So I finished all my stuff that I had to do from homework, and then I was allowed to eat. But he told me that, look, if you really want to sustain yourself, always try and create hunger for you. Uh, right? I think be hungry is something that my father taught me personally,
Yeah.
and then give your best in whatever you are trying to do. So yeah,
Do you feel like that built a level of resilience from a young age?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, I love that. And then last question.
yeah.
What advice would you give to the HR leaders of tomorrow that will be sitting in your seat one day?
I would say HR is the best function one can get into. You just get to uh, meet people, you just get to learn from people, and just get an opportunity to just give it back to people in just so many ways. And I think uh, I would say also, do not get into this function if you generally do not like people. There's just so much to learn from people around you, and this is a function where you can really help a person become a better individual.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing can be more satisfying than that.
Yeah. Well, listen, really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you taking the time out, and I love what you and the team have created. I know you're on the journey. There's no destination. This is continuous,
Yeah.
but where you are so far, it's incredible. And I love the way, like I said earlier, that you're linking this back to putting it into practice, linking it back to the strategic, the business, and then constantly creating that feedback loop, both through people, technology, and the organization. I feel like it's incredible, and it's a good lens to look at everything as well. So I appreciate the work you've been doing. Congrats to you and the team, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me over, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for all the thought-provoking questions. At least I'm going back reflecting on a couple of things that I should be doing differently.
Yeah, no worries. All the
That
best.
I'm
Thanks a lot.
taking back from this conversation. Thank you, and all the best to you as well.